Welcome, everybody, and welcome to my talk about aligning teams and architecture for fast flow, a use case at Alliander. And it's great that you all have chosen this talk to visit, so I'm very happy about that. What you can expect today is a talk with a combination of theory and practice. So first, I'm talk a bit about the theory. Why would you want to align teams and architecture? Then I'll give you a little bit of context of the use case at Alliander. Then I'll talk about some problem indicators. So how can you notice that you have some problems with fast flow because of alignment in teams and architecture? Take you with me on the journey that we had at Alliander, and we'll close off with the benefits. So let's start with the why. Why would I want to do this? And I'll start here with what would happen if I would optimize only based on architecture for fast flow. Well, architecture is mainly about managing complexity, and it mostly comes down to these principles: loose coupling, high cohesion, and modularity. So what we try to do is have a loosely coupled, highly cohesive system, and in that way split it up in modular parts that are independent of each other, and therefore easier to reason about. And what would this look like? So you can see these circles as methods inside of a class, or classes inside of a package or of a namespace, or maybe even use cases inside a microservice. And what you will see is where the system grows, the local complexity grows as well. You get too many responsibilities inside the place. And if we listen to Kent Beck, he says you should pull the things apart that are unrelated of each other, and the things that are related to each other, you should put them closer together. So if we listen to the advice of Mr. Beck, you will see here that you will modularize the system. The local complexity has gotten too big, and what you will do is split it into independent parts with high cohesion, things that belong together naturally. But if you keep doing this, and this system grows, you have to watch out that you're not evolving into a big ball of mud at the end, or a distributed big ball of mud. And now you see that the local complexity in every circle is still quite simple, but the global complexity is getting a bit out of hand. Not there yet, but if you don't watch out and do the same concept again, but then on a higher level, so you see again circles here, and you can again group them in smaller parts that are clearer to reason about. And if you don't do that, you might end up like Uber did in 2018. This is a picture of their microservices architecture with the microservices and the lines of communication around there. And they also decided, yeah, this is not where we want to be. We should group things again. And they used the domain, in this case, to group things and make the global complexity more manageable. So far on the architecture side of things. What would you do if you would also consider the business side of things? Well, if you think about the business, it usually starts with a strategy or a business plan, which leads to opportunities and problems to solve, different domains. And at the end, you can have an architecture optimized for those problems to solve and opportunities. And if you think, why would that matter? Well, the nice thing about these business opportunities and problems is that they are naturally decoupled. They have nothing to do with each other. And in that case, you can also develop solutions that are naturally decoupled as well. So you have two benefits here, and you are aligned with the business strategy, and you've got a way to decouple your architecture. Okay, now another axis. What if you consider the team topology as well? Well, one good thing to be aware of is Conway's law. And Conway states something about the importance of team structure as well. What Conway's law mentions is that, easily said, the communication structure will influence the system architecture. And if you take this to a team level, you might understand that communication inside a team is very excessive. So you have a lot of communication and well-communicated things in teams. But teams, the communication is often less well. So the result of that is that everything inside a team will be coupled more, and everything outside the team will be decoupled more. And if you take that to another level, knowing Conway's law, you might want to influence that. So you don't want that the organization structure is influencing your architecture. And what you can do is you can start with the desired architecture and map your team topology onto that, so that Conway's law is working for you. You can have the same team topology as the system architecture as you want it to be. And as said in the ThoughtWord Stack Radar, you can't fight Conway's law. You have to design with Conway's law in mind. And otherwise, it will become a serious impediment. So, or it can be a key enabler, and if you don't think about it, it can be a serious impediment. So what we see here is that a joint effort is needed. You want the business side of things to have solutions grouped around a business problem. You want the architecture side of things, because those are the people who are able to think about loosely coupled, highly cohesive solutions. And you want to think about Conway's law. You want to align your teams with your architecture. And that leads to a well-known term, the socio-technical architecture. And what this means is that architecture isn't only technical. It's a combination of the social parts and the architectural parts, and even the business parts. And the idea is that you look for the joint optimal solution of these things, and that you don't consider only one part, but you consider all the parts together. All right, now I've described a bit about the importance of socio-technical architecture and why that is important. Let me introduce myself. I'm Paul van der Slot. I'm a freelance software engineer or architect. I'm a domain-driven design enthusiast. And I've been working at Alliander now for 1.5 years, started as a software engineer and later on also as an architect. And now I'm going to talk a bit about the background of Alliander. So what is Alliander and what is especially Kleinverbruik, where I'm working right now? Well, Alliander is the biggest energy network operator in the Netherlands, with almost 6 million customers, connections as customers, sorry. And Kleinverbruik is the part of Alliander where I work. It's literally translated small consumption, and it's a group of positive and ambitious people who are working for the connections of households and small businesses. So if people like you and me want to change something about their connection, you will end up, if it's your region, at Alliander Kleinverbruik. And the main process here is from customer request to energy supply. And in the picture here, you see somebody who wants to be more energy efficient. And what needs to happen there, he needs a heavier cable, and heavier electricity connection, and therefore someone has to dig a hole in the ground to make that work. So how would that look like for that person? Well, he would start to go to a website, mijnaansluiting.nl, there fill in a form, which will be sent to, and there we'll start with an intake. So we'll check the customer needs and what we need to do for that. Then we will do some work preparation. Then the execution phase will start, which will be done by a contractor. At the end, completion will start, so we will verify what the contractor did and store the new situation. And hopefully we'll have a happy customer at the end. Then a small moment to think about the organization of Kleinverbruik. What I want to say here is that we have both IT teams and business teams. I'm obviously on the IT side of things, but the business teams are working with the solution the IT teams provide. So those are the people who work to prepare the contracts, prepare for the contractors and verify the contractors. Those are the people with the actual electricity and gas expertise. And the main challenges of Alliander were, of course, like everyone, reducing costs, so automating parts of the business, but also an ideal customer journey. And what was the state was that the custom-built SAP application that they had at that moment was end of life. So there was need for a new system. And 5 years ago, it was the start of the creation of the new system, which would be a scalable microservices architecture, with first one type of work in it, quite simple work where no digging was required. And at a later point, the idea was to put all the types of work in there so we could move away from the old SAP application. And we wanted to tackle all three challenges by doing this, so it should be mostly automated, customer-friendly, and not in the legacy system, but we decided to use Java and Kotlin with Angular to do this. But then, quite unexpected, the war in Ukraine started, and gas became very expensive. And this also has impact on the challenges that we had. While we first were reducing costs, it was now hard to be able to just keep up with all the work. People would make their own homes more sustainable. There would be more charging stations, and altogether it would be 7.5% more work each year, every year, on and on, which makes it quite challenging for Alliander. And doing the work gets harder as well. You can see it on the media, where our electrical network is reaching the limits of what it can handle in certain regions. So all together, it was just, while I joined Alliander, we were already a bit further in making the new system, but there were big challenges ahead. Okay, so after this small intermezzo about kleinverbruik, let's get back to the topic, aligning teams and architecture. And I want to start with, how do I know that I have a problem? Because you can think, okay, aligning teams and architecture, good idea, but maybe my teams and architecture is already quite well aligned. How do I know that I have a problem here? Well, the goal is fast flow. So what we want to achieve is delivering valuable software quickly and efficiently. And the problem indicators are also related to that. So the scope here is alignment of teams and architecture. So we're not looking at dysfunction of teams or things like that. We're talking about well-functioning, sustainable teams that encounter problems outside of their scope. So the problem indicators we are looking at are the situations where local optimizations are not helping. You really have to zoom out of the team view into the bigger picture and see inside the whole system that you need to change something. The situation where you really need a holistic view. And these are the 5 problem indicators that I'm going to talk about. I will elaborate on them one by one, and I will give you hints. They will give you hints on why your architecture and your teams are not well aligned. Well, the first one is dependencies and meetings. And this is quite an obvious one, right? If you see this on your PI planning board, you can already have an idea that things aren't going well. And it isn't that all dependencies and meetings are bad, but if even for the simplest features you need to be in meetings with other teams, then that might be a signal that there is something wrong with how your teams are aligned. Shared code is the one. Shared code base is the one that I'll skip because that's quite obvious. Then we'll come to the limited scope of responsibilities. And what you see here is that as a team, you will have no meaning or impact. You have just that small kind of scope that you don't get any feedback of the whole process, and you are just optimizing for a small part of the solution. And if you do want to make an impact, we come back to the problem before, you have to have a lot of meetings and talks with other teams to get the global thing aligned. The next one is the cognitive load. The cognitive load is too high. And it's just getting too much for your brain to understand everything that's going on. It's hard to grasp everything inside of what your responsibilities. And how do you know that this is the case? Well, there are some indicators. And these questions can help you with it. So how long does it take for you to onboard new team members before they understand what is happening? Or how long does it take to implement changes? And how often are there faults during deployments because you didn't think of something that also had to be done? Those are signals for cognitive load that is too high. And when you don't consider cognitive load as an important thing, you'll spread teams across domains thin. So what I mean by that is that you work on different domains on different features. And those are probably unrelated features. And what you will notice then is that there are too many concepts you need to be aware of. You have to understand all of the things on different areas. And it's also a lot of unrelated information. While if things would be more related to each other, let's say part of one domain, then it would be easier to see the bigger picture and to get mastery on the whole domain. And this would be less load for your memory because everything is related to each other and you can get a whole picture inside of your head. And the last one is no clear purpose. So what you see here is that teams are not empowered around a purpose. And signals that you see there is that motivation drops in teams. They have no drive, like in the book that I have put there from Daniel Pink. There's a lot of context switching in the team. And there is no mastery of the domain. The team also has no autonomy on optimizing software around the purpose, because if they had a clear purpose, they could do the things that mattered the most. But now they're just handling different requests from everywhere, because they are working on so many different things. So, these were the problem indicators that I want to talk about. And if you think about it, why do they block fast flow? Why these problem indicators? Well, that's because, in this case, your teams are not aligned around independent value streams. So in the ideal situation, as a team, you would be responsible of an end-to-end process with value, where you can do everything. And to conclude to that, independent value streams have fast flow because the team is empowered to make nearly all of the decisions in that value stream. So let's pause for a moment and let that sink in. The team is empowered to do everything from end to end for the whole value stream and make all the decisions. So from discovery of new features, to implementing it as code, to deploying it into production and getting feedback from the customer. If that's all the responsibility within one team, you can also think about, okay, then I have less dependencies, then I don't have a shared code base. Then my scope isn't too limited because everything is related, cognitive load isn't too high, and I have a clear purpose. All right, so let's assess the situation at Alliander. How was this at Alliander? Here you see a picture of our process, so from intake to completing, and you see the software teams mapped on that. So a color is a software team, and a circle there with that color is a piece of software. And what you see here is that the blue team had the most part of the software. At the bottom, you see, I will answer questions and go to you at the end. Yeah, cool. The bottom part is the SAP applications that were the legacy system, and the new applications were on top of that, where mostly the blue team was involved there. The red team also had a part in there, and there were, like from the green and the yellow team, a few activities that were automated. And what was happening at Alliander was that the blue team was the bottleneck. It was the first team that started the automation journey, and it was a very ambitious team. And they started building software and solving a whole flow for a type of work. And in the next flow, they also built something. They were in control of the intake domain, which was the most complex one. And what you see is that other teams were dependent on this team. So the dependencies, check. Cognitive load was way too high because they had to know everything. There was a lot of context switching, and therefore also low motivation, low autonomy, and lots of requests from other teams. And altogether, it was just a stressful experience for this team. So this is an indication of that it wasn't that well aligned at that moment. Another one is other teams also didn't feel empowered around something. You can also see it by the small pieces of software of the other teams, which might be an indicator that they had a lot of dependencies on the blue team, they had no clear purpose, and just a limited amount of scope. So we also wanted to help the other teams. And now I have a question for you all. Maybe we can do a show of hands. Do people in this room recognize these problem indicators in your situation? Yeah? All right. So pay attention to the next part, because now we're going a step further. All right. And at Alliander, it wasn't that they weren't aware of these problem indicators, just like you guys. You all probably know that those are the case. But there was just no clear view on how to improve from this point. The team topology once made just started with a team and then another team. It was just never revisited. So it was clear that there were some problem indicators. How can we start to improve? And I would like to explain that by this picture from the book of TEQnation, Architecture Modernization, which is a great book, which will help you get from legacy software towards fast flow. And what TEQnation states is that if you want to achieve independent teams with fast flow, you have to start at the right with loosely coupled subdomains. And if you have loosely coupled subdomains, it might be easier to create loosely coupled architecture. And from that, if you map your teams onto that architecture, you can also have independent teams with fast flow. So let's go into a little bit more detail of this picture. What is a domain? Well, a domain is an area of business activity, a group of business capabilities that naturally belong together. At least there is a lot of cohesion inside a business domain. And example domains could be marketing or sales or loyalty, shipping, billing, maybe fraud detection, just an area of business activity. And if your domain boundaries are quite well defined, it's also easy to have a loosely coupled architecture. Because those domains are, as I said before, naturally decoupled, changes will stay inside of a domain, new features will stay inside of a domain. You actually just have a roadmap per domain. So the architecture can easily be aligned on that subdomain. And then at last, if you use the inverse Conway maneuver, you can use that to map your teams onto a domain. And if one domain is owned by one team, then you get empowered teams solving a problem. So concluding, it is all about designing loosely coupled domains. That's what we need. All right, how to get there? But before we go there, I want to give some examples on not loosely coupled domains. What are worse ways to split something? Well, as seen as in this picture, you can see that there are different ways to put boundaries around your domain. You can group them by shape, by color, or by something else. And the things that I see go wrong the most times is, for instance, a split by layer. So that you get a domain for the DBA, for the backend, and for the front end. Another one that I see happen often is a split by entity. So one domain for the customer, one for the product, one for the case. But what happens if you do that, and you see it in the picture, that those rectangles are functional flows, use cases. If you want to achieve something functional, if you want to deliver a feature, then you need a combination, most of the time, of all layers. But you also need a combination of all entities, because a customer alone doesn't do something. He wants to do something with the product on his case. So you need a whole view on that. So if you split like this, you will end up with lots of coupling, lots of meetings, and all the problem indicators that I've described before. All right. So let's talk about identifying loosely coupled domains. We want to achieve that, but how to get there? because this is the key to get independent teams with fast flow. We want to start with a shared business view. And we did this at Alliander with a design sprint. So what we did there 1 year ago is that a big group of both business and tech came together a whole week for a design sprint. And there they decided what is the direction that Kleinverbruik will go to in the future. And they created a prototype how they wanted to solve those problems. So we had a business view. Another common alternative on creating a business view is with event storming, where you create a shared view on the timeline with the concrete events that are happening, and you enforce that there's a shared understanding in the room. And in fact, we use this technique in the next step. All right. So in the next step is all about finding the domain boundaries. So we have a clear view on the business. Now let's find the boundaries. And this we did with big picture event storming with smaller groups. So we had product owners, architects, and developers together, thinking about, okay, if we get this prototype and make it concrete, what would it look like? What kind of events would happen? And the goal here was just to see if the prototype was feasible. Can we make that? And it could help us with finding the boundaries of the domains. And there are some things to pay attention to when you are looking for domain boundaries. And if you're into domain-driven design, that can already be a great benefit with the bounded context. But if you don't know about that, there are also other things that you can think about. And I will explain some example heuristics for the people new to this. So one is language. If you think about language, you can see that you are moving into another domain. So at one part of the event storming, you see events with a customer, and later on it says recipient. Well, that's an indicator that you have moved into another domain. Another one is purpose. So one purpose in the case of Alliander was preparing the work. Sorry. And later on we were validating the work. So the purpose changed there. Another heuristic to look at is user groups. So at Alliander, we first had the work preparation. That was done by the business teams of Alliander. And then the execution phase, which was done by the contractor. So which was a different user group, and therefore an indicator this might be a different domain. Another thing to pay attention to is pivotal events. Well, what are pivotal events? Those are specific events who are particularly relevant for the business with a certain amount of gravity. And they mark transition between business phases. So in this example, you see in the middle the website launched. And there really is a world before the website launched and after the website launched. So before, they were busy with design of the website. They were thinking about pricing of tickets and publishing. Well, in the phase after, they were busy with the sales of tickets and with social media to let everyone know that the website was published. So this can help in finding domains. And when you pay attention to those two things, the language, the purpose, the user groups, and also the pivotal events, you can see domains emerge. So here these circles are emerging domains, where language changed, a pivotal event was in between. And that's what we did at Alliander as well. So the first sign of domains that we found, the first iteration, we watched and saw our core process, where we had 5 steps, so order receiving, an intake, work preparation, execution, and completing. And you see that we give a real purpose to one of those domains. So in intake, we are busy with understanding what the customer wants, how we can make it happen, and when we can make it happen. So the purpose here is agreement on the work and some kind of certainty on the realization. I will not go through all the stages, but this might give an indication of what we did there. Then the next step was to centralize concepts that were common in this core process. So think about task for the employee, for the business teams, or communication to the customer. And the goal here was creating ownership for the common steps, so a team could own the responsibility of what was happening there, and reducing the complexity of the core process. And an example we had at Alliander was around SAP Finance. So from many points in our process, we were thinking about the finance part of things. So we were creating invoice recipients, we were creating sales and service orders for the customer and for the contractor. And at the end, the service order was fulfilled. And a pain point here was that was a shared responsibility for the order management in SAP. When we wanted to introduce a new type of order in SAP Finance, all the teams had to collaborate together to make it happen. And another thing was that we also read things from SAP Finance. And in that case, it was hard to coordinate things because one team would store something, one team would read it. It was like a shared database at some moments. So what we decided to do here is we created a domain billing and we put it in between. And the benefits that we saw here was reduced complexity in the core process. Nobody had to think about what has to happen on the billing side of things. We would just emit events, order received, intake completed, order completed, and billing would find out, okay, then we have to create an invoice recipient, we have to create the sales orders, and we have to fulfill an order. And what we see there is reduced complexity in the core process. We only store data in SAP that the billing team thought of. We didn't read anymore. And we had the responsibility on optimizing everything about SAP Finance in one team. So if we wanted to do something else there, just one team had a task on their backlog, and everybody else didn't even have to think about it. The next step that we did was reducing the complexity in the most important domain. So we had the intake domain, which was a core domain, still quite big. And if we saw to the backlog, the most of the differentiating features were for that domain. That's where the most important things happened. So what we decided was that two activities that happened there became a known domain, a subdomain. And those were quite complex activities. In this case, the network check. We checked if for a new connection it would fit the electrical network. And another one is the working drawing, where I would decide what the specific work was that needed to be done by the contractor. And by doing this, we made it easier for the intake domain. That one became simpler, and there were two small pieces there. This is all related to the teams side of things, because we wanted cognitive load not too high in one domain. One team should be able to handle one domain by itself. And then we moved on, and with our current understanding, we ended up with this. So we also see two new domains overreaching at the top. One is task management. So during the whole process, there were tasks that needed to be done. In the intake phase, make a working drawing, but also at the completing phase, we had to verify what the contractor did. And we needed some kind of task management system for the people working on that. Because of the splitting up in domain, we also had a problem with searching things and getting an overview. Where in the process is my order? So that is also a separate domain here. And what is good to know is that domains are not static. It's not that we made this picture and now we're done. Business priority will change, but we did make a prototype, so that's not too likely. But also our understanding will evolve. And you also did see that when the war started in Ukraine, priorities of people did evolve as well. So there are a lot of uncertainties that can happen that makes us or forces us to reassess this picture and change it. What I want to say as well is that finding the right boundaries is also not easy. And changing the boundaries is not for free. So you shouldn't rush into decisions. This is not an easy process, and it's easy to change the picture of the plan. But if you really want to make an impact, you have to make that picture reality. And then you don't want to do that often. This is like we want to set a vision on what we want to achieve, but it isn't reality yet. And that's where I'm moving on to the next steps about mapping teams onto this. There are also some heuristics on validating the domain boundaries. So we also had a lot of questions when we were done. Okay, is this it? Are we right? Is this the correct way to do it? And luckily, there's an objective way to validate this. It's called independent service heuristics. And if you go to the GitHub of Team Topologies, you can find it. These are questions you can ask yourself, which give you an indication if a service is really independent. And what we did as well before talking to the teams was consensus with the people involved. So with the product owners, product managers, stakeholders, the teams. We wanted to have a consensus about, okay, this is the picture of our ideal state of domains. Do you agree? Do you think that this is the way to go? Before talking about what it would impact the teams and what would happen there. All right. Then mapping the teams onto the domains. So we've talked about business strategy and forming the domains, and now we have to map the teams onto them. And there are some heuristics in mapping the teams onto domains. One of them is one team per domain, so you have ownership. So you don't want a domain owned by two teams. Another one is using cognitive load. So you can use the cognitive load of a team to determine if a team can handle multiple domains, or maybe even one domain. Is a domain even too big for one team? That's why we split it up the intake domain as well. And you want to decide together with the teams. You don't want to force this onto people. And this is what we did. So this is a picture of the domains we ended up with. And each color is a team, and each sticky is a piece of software globally, a small product. And what we did is we asked the teams, get all your products out there, all your pieces of software, and where should it belong in the new situation? And this is what we ended up with, just for seeing what we are dealing with. Now, from that point on, it was quite easy for someone's. There were some circles that were all in one color. So there it was an easy choice that those things would stay with those teams. So the blue team, which was the bottleneck, now has only the first two domains, where the first one is quite small, so that was manageable. But what we decided was everything else that was blue shouldn't be the responsibility anymore of the blue team. And we didn't want to change as much as well, because then you have to transfer software to other teams, etc. So we wanted to make it a bit stable here. And this was about the hard choices. So what we did here is we talked to the teams, and what is your vision on the future? Where do you want to help? And we want as less handover as possible. Well, the red team, although it might not look like that, was already doing a lot in work preparation. But some of the things were just beyond work preparation and more near execution. So we decided to put the red team on that part, and the yellow team in execution. Also because we weren't clear about the split between execution and completion. So then we still could learn in the future there. And we decided to create a new team for the billing part. So this is what we ended up with. And therefore, we still had some questions about if this was the right split. So one thing is the working drawing. There was still a lot of collaboration between intake and working drawing. And a lot of questions about should this be a part of the working drawing or not. And we foresee that this will flatten out over time and it really will become the working drawing as a service at some point. But now it is still a lot of collaboration. And another important aspect to keep it like this is because of the workload in the intake was quite high, and we did it intentionally to put an activity out there as a separate domain. And another one I mentioned before, we weren't completely sure about these splits, but to keep this inside of one team, we are still able to learn in the future and to adapt. So that was a reason there. All right. So what we did is we did it bit by bit, the most urgent things first, and we learned along the way. So what are the benefits here? We see the dependencies go down. So we have loosely coupled architecture with less dependencies. We also see the flow of changes go up. Also, the purpose is clear now for everybody. So you have empowered teams around the domain with clear ownership. We also see that the teams are able to innovate now around the domain. So this is also a big plus. They are really learning about what the domain consists of. And well, the developers aren't code monkeys anymore, just building some feature, but they are really envisioning what something should be like and thinking proactively with the business. And team happiness goes up. So especially for the blue team, who was very stressed, you see now that that team is really thriving and delivering wonderful features right now. And here's some feedback from the teams that I've got. So first, the product owner. So several product owners said that it really strengthened their feeling of empowerment and ownership. Also the architect. The architect really said that now teams are empowered, they can think about their own architecture, and the architects only have to think about the overarching things and not the things in a domain. And also the developers are way more happy because they understand the purpose of the domain, they can get creative in problem solving, and because they own the whole domain, they can also tackle tech debt way easier because they can see in context of everything here, we own all that, so we can improve on this technical depth without influencing other teams. So what you see here is that you cannot create fast flow alone. You have to co-design with other people. You have to get the business involved, so you have to start with the business strategy. You have to get the architecture involved, so you have to make sure that domains are loosely coupled, because those are the people who do really know what loose coupling means, so they can help with structuring the domains and know what kind of things to think about. And you have to make the team topology makers involved, so you can map the teams on that architecture. Finally, I want to mention some resources here. I already mentioned the architecture modernization book from Nick Chun, which is great. Then some other books around domain-driven design, team topologies, and empowered teams. And if you want to do this yourself, I also advise you to take a look at the domain-driven design starter modeling process, which will take you step by step through all the phases. It's a little bit opinionated about domain-driven design, but it will help you to get from alignment, business perspective, discovery, towards domains, and at the end, towards code. So if you want to dive deeper in this subject, I really advise these. And that was it. Thanks for all the attention, and I hope I inspired you to have a look at your own system.